Hi all, thanks for joining me. Today I want to have a little look at menopausal anxiety. It is something that's incredibly common and it's something I see a lot of. And I just thought it would be helpful to go through what it is and then what it is not, and also have a look at some of the drivers. Because this is a classic. I get women who come to see me, they say, I feel like my brain gets hijacked, which is kind of a weird sort of a thing. And it really does feel like I don't know quite what's going on or who I am anymore. And the way I'm reacting to things is really very different to that which I used to be able to handle. And so what I'm finding is women think they're losing their minds, and they're not. It's their body giving them information. It's about the real recalibration of hormones that are happening around perimenopause and into menopause. And good news is, right at the start, your body will get used to what's happening. It's just for some women, it can be quite a roller coaster. And we'll look at some of the reasons why that might be. And then I'll give you some simple ideas based on research. So I've gone into the literature and found things that we know are going to help. There are many things that can help and can be useful and can be personalized to each person. But generally speaking, what is it that we can do? Okay, start. So, first things first, nearly 40% of women report anxiety transitioning into menopause. That's an enormous amount of people who may not have been ever anxious in their life before, but now they are. Nearly half of women transitioning into menopause think they report a low mood. Now, I'm going to talk about depression more next week, so stay tuned for that. But you know, if we just look at that, we've got an enormous cohort of people who are noticing changes in their mood, and to a greater extent, this is affecting the way they live their life, the quality of their life. It's creating issues for women that I see, and it's really important to know that you're not alone and that there is a way through this. 65 women, 60, I wish it was only 65 women, but a great deal of women, 65%, they talk about brain fog. They talk about, I used to be able to recall things in meetings and I can't now. I'm forgetting things. I used to be sharper than this. And now they're reticent to speak up in meetings. They're not sure of themselves. It feels like you're just not able to access the filing cabinet in your brain. Um, and it is that perimenopause is when our hormones are often fluctuating quite wildly. And that means that we have this myriad of different symptoms. Mood is really one of the big drivers that I find, yeah, really find women are really destabilized by, and it drives them into coming to see someone like me, going, "Oh, I don't know what to do next. Like, I've tried a few things. I don't know what's happening. I think I'm losing my mind. Feels like my brain's being hijacked." And I like this idea here. This is not general anxiety. This is a neurobiologically distinct process. Neurobiological. This is your brain and your hormone. And they're just getting thrown around and having to come up with a different way of working. And as I said, for some women, that can take a little while, and it can be, uh, it takes a little while for it to all settle down as well. So Who's who in the zoo? Okay, so we've got estrogen, and maybe you don't think about progesterone so much. I think we think about menstruation and sort of, perimenopause and menopause, and we just think, well, estrogen's disappearing, and it is. Estrogen and serotonin have a love affair, and serotonin's our happy hormone. And so when our estrogen is declining in the later years of perimenopause and certainly into early stages of menopause, you will often find the serotonin is following. So it will be lower. And I find a lot of women will start to have their mood issues around it, as a result of not necessarily their life is falling apart, or although it may look like it is, but it's about their hormones are just decreasing and therefore the serotonin is decreasing as well. So they find low mood, they find irritability, and that emotional reactivity. So I find women telling me that they just used to be able to handle things much better, and now it just takes nothing to, set them off. A lot of prescriptions for SSRIs at this point, antidepressants, and I have no problem as a naturopath sitting with people who are taking medication. I see my role as working in with the medication, so being a complementary partner to that and making sure that there are no interactions, which is incredibly important if you're on medication. So just taking anything off the shelf because it's available to you does not always mean that it is safe for you to take it if you are taking medication. And it is really important that you see someone who understands interactions and can find out what they are and make sure that there aren't any. Or that if there are, that they are advantageous and supportive rather than detrimental and obviously being more of a problem. So SSRIs are prescribed and they can help. Often women will, instead of getting HRT or MRT, they will get an SSRI given to them. And that's very confusing for them because it's like, I don't think I'm anxious. But if you know the relationship with estrogen and serotonin, then you know that that SSRI has some merit. Now, I'm not here to tell you about antidepressants. It's not in my scope of practice. If you're concerned about it for any reason, that's a conversation to have with your GP. And I strongly urge you to do that. The other hormone that we think less of is progesterone. Now, progesterone has a love affair with GABA. Now, GABA is the only inhibitory neurotransmitter that we have in our brain that calms us down. And the progesterone, or the metabolite of progesterone, allopregnanolone, will attach onto the GABA-A receptors in our brain and make us feel calm. It's lovely. But as progesterone decreases, then so does our relationship with GABA. And then that can create more, irritability, the insomnia in particular, because we need GABA again to calm us down and to aid our sleep. So you can see the combination just between these two neurotransmitters, the serotonin and the GABA. And there are many more interactions that I'm not going into, but they're the two big ones. It's like that's a recipe for having anxiety. And then throw in the HPA axis. Now, the HPA axis, HPA is hypothalamus, which is the part of your brain that thinks and feels. P is for pituitary, which is the master gland in the middle of your head. So the master gland is speaking to, your brain, which is good, unless the messages coming through aren't good. And then the A is the adrenal axis. So that's our stress response. So what we've got is our brain and our hormones and our stress response intricately linked, which is great if you're in a stressful situation, you need to get up and run away really quickly or stand and fight. And if that's what you're living on, a lot of the time, then, because of the traffic, because of the deadlines, because of the just general life, then that is a problem. So now we've got a heightened stress response on top of a body who's not being able to be, calm, and whose neurotransmitters for mood are being affected, particularly at this time. So you can see the drivers, that you can see the players in the game here are all sort of jostling, and that's why it can sometimes be really wildly fluctuating and also cause so much havoc. So what have we got? We've got anxiety, we've got poor sleep, because one feeds the other. The more anxious I am during the day, the less likely I am to sleep, because what's happened is the information that's been sent to my brain all day is we're in a stressed situation. This is really dangerous. And in a dangerous situation, my body, as a survival mechanism, will not let me get into a really deep sleep, because it's much harder to wake up from that. So we usually have um, difficulty getting to sleep, difficulty staying asleep, or we wake unrefreshed because we haven't had, as I said, that deep sleep. And as a result, we kind of wake up feeling tired. Most often, women will do more caffeine, and that will play havoc with blood glucose, which will play havoc with cortisol, which is our stress response. So our HPA axis is now activated, and then that feeds into more anxiety, more poor sleep, and you can see the cycle going around and around. And then we've got the estrogen and our brain regulating our temperature. So as the estrogen declines, so too does our brain's ability to navigate temperature in the room. So whether it's too hot or too cold. Now, generally, we overheat and we get the hot flushes. And that, particularly at night, again disrupts the sleep. I've had women who've had to get up and change the sheets because it's just so drenching. So with all of that, that will often, trigger the unrefreshed sleep and the heightened anxiety during the day. And then adding in, the caffeine, which again can drive the anxiety. It's just this vicious cycle. There are other things that are going to predispose some women to a higher risk of anxiety. So having difficulty with estrogen metabolism, and I did a video on estrogen metabolism, happy to do more about that. But women who have had difficulty with PMS, PMDD, postnatal depression, they can also mean that you are perhaps at a higher risk or more predisposed, as it says, to experiencing anxiety at a higher rate, just in menopause. Um, Surgical menopause is, menopause happens relatively quickly over a period of a year or so, with, the lead up possibly could be 10 years before, but it's often only just a couple of years. So it's quite a big change in a shorter period of time. But a surgical menopause happens overnight. It's usually as a result of removal, a hysterectomy, for instance, or some reason that um, the womb is taken out, and it's often, it's certainly not a surgery to be taken lightly. People, if that's necessary, then that's the way it is. But it is also quite a marked change for the body. So that can really shake things up. Thyroid functions, it's particularly hyperthyroid, but thyroid in and of itself can also create havoc with mood. And anyone who's chronically sleep deprived, and you can see from the previous slide how that can happen quite easily, will also be a driver or a precursor to anxiety. What I also find is this idea of sandwich generation. So I see a lot of women who've got kids still, maybe at home, maybe at uni, they've got their own careers, and now they're caring for their aged parents. And, they're sandwich generation. They've got everyone, they're trying to hold together, and that can create problems. Often there's major transitions at this point in time, life transitions and relationship difficulties. I see many women who are questioning their role in society, not only, but the role in their family, perhaps the long-term relationships that they've been in are not, I think it's a time, it is a real recalibration, as I say, but so for many, many different topics and many different areas. And so I often find women coming in saying, this is not serving me anymore. I don't know what to do, but this is not working. And so we sit and we unpack the things that are not working and just have a look at them and work with them or come up with solutions around that. So as a counselor, I see that a lot. There are definitely social isolation. We saw that in COVID being a huge issue. And you may have community, you may have girlfriends around you, you may have family around you, which is a really good support, and you may not. It can be quite isolating at this time too. So that could be a driver, as will negative beliefs and attitudes around transitioning into menopause, but just negative attitudes that perhaps we've had since childhood. It might be parents that have given that information to us. It could be teachers growing up. Those sort of things linger. And when you're not sleeping well, they can sometimes come like to the fore and be the loudest voice that we're listening to, that critic. Certainly anyone with a history of PTSD or history of trauma, we know that trauma, particularly PSD, can be hypersensitive and appear from nowhere. It can be a trigger that can just set it off. And that's a bigger picture than anxiety at menopause. But it could be just simmering under the surface, so that might not be something that you've addressed for decades, and it could come out at this point in time. I have seen that too. And lower health literacy might sound condescending, and I certainly don't mean it in that way, but just not understanding what's happening. I I think I find women having comfort going, oh, that's it. Right, I'm not losing my mind. This is just what it's not, doesn't maybe make it go away, but it helps you to know that this is just a process that you are going through that also can be managed. And so how are we going to manage it? Well, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is a talking therapy. It's a counseling technique, and you may have heard of it, you may come across it, and it can be enormously helpful for anxiety. It is something that I work with amongst other different techniques, and it can be really helpful at this time. Mindfulness is also a huge area that is showing great evidence for support. And this it might be meditating for an hour in the lotus position, but it's so much more than that. And it doesn't always have to be complex, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time out of your day. But what it does is it calms your body down, and it gets you out of that stress response. It decreases that hyperactivation, that nervous system, sympathetic dominant nervous system, as we call it, and it gets it into what we need for resting and digesting, that parasympathetic part of our nervous system. So some good ideas there. What does that actually look like? Well, breathing, and it might sound like silly, you're just sitting there going, I know, I breathe all the time, but breathing is enormously powerful. And that can support us to get into that parasympathetic nervous system where we're calmer. And that even might be what I will often say is if you can do the box breathing or circle breathing or whatever shape you want it to be, but in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. So that what that really does is it can slow your breathing down to taking about 6 breaths a minute. Now, clearly you have to be sitting in one place. You can't be driving a car trying to do this. But if it is something that you can manage even for 2 minutes, what we know is that that's going to shift you into that parasympathetic, that calming part of our nervous system. It's a great idea to try and do 6 breaths in a minute for 2 minutes before you eat, perhaps, or certainly before you try and go to bed, because that's the time that you need to be in that calm state. And certainly if you wake in the middle of the, early hours of the morning, again, doing those breathing techniques can help you just calm the body back down. Mindfulness and mindfulness-based stress response there are programs that are well studied and they certainly are improving sleep. So mindfulness techniques, of which one can be breathing, and we can go through those different techniques in consultation and work with what is going to work with you. And then the relaxation, the progressive muscle relaxation, there are many meditation apps, and sometimes I hear a lot of women saying, I can't meditate. And the truth is, it is actually quite difficult, and it is a practice, so you need to keep at it. But the apps like Calm and Headspace, they all have progressive muscle relaxation. Again, could be something to listen to, even if it was a 5, even 10-minute, breathe in, take your energy to your feet, breathe out, and you just work all the way up the body. Tense that muscle, release it with the out breath. That kind of progressive relaxation is, again, fantastic for supporting the body to calm down. And doing it, as I said, before bed could be a really good idea. What else? Well, hormonal support. And if you are on HRT or MHT, as it's called, menopause hormone treatment, or HRT, that is a conversation for you and your GP. I, as a naturopath, as a nutritionist, as a counsellor, will work in with anything that anyone comes to me on. It can be a game changer for women, and there are many different types. It's a conversation, as I said, it's out of my scope to tell you whether to take it or not to take it, but it's absolutely a conversation that I think you can have and should have with your GP to see if it's right for you. If it's needed, if it's right for you, if it's part of the whole range of things that you can do to support yourself through this transition. There may be adrenal support. Ashwagandha you've probably come across with Ania, or rhodiola, which is quite a stimulating herb. But anyway, black cohosh in there. There are some fantastic herbs to support symptom relief. Now, again, I wouldn't suggest that you jump into taking any herbs if you are on any medications without doing an interactions check. It just could be fraught with problems. And I constantly see people who are taking things thinking that they're natural, and because they're over the counter that they're okay, they won't hurt you, And the truth is, hopefully they won't. But it's absolutely the right thing to be safe rather than sorry, and make sure that, so maybe coming to see someone like me to just make sure that you're on exactly the right herb and the right dose and the right combination, and to make sure that they're not interacting with anything further. Certainly having a look at the thyroid. When I get menopausal, when menopausal women come in, if they haven't had their thyroid checked, their cholesterol, their blood glucose, had a electrolyte liver function test, I will usually run those rather cheap standard pathology tests. Chances are you've actually already had them done. And so I use those kind of markers as a baseline to start with. Okay, where are we today? What does that look like? Because if we can change a few simple things, then that could be a really supportive, alongside a whole lot of other things. Nutritionally, of course, we've got magnesium. It is a cofactor for making GABA, our calming inhibitory neurotransmitter, along with B6. But B6 has been in the news recently, and you might have seen it. We can have too much B6, and that can cause neuropathy, so pins and needles and irreversible. So it's really important to not take too much of a good thing. The same with folate and B12. They are certainly needed for neurotransmitter production, and there are different types of folate and B12 that could be more preferentially ideal for certain people, certain women, depending on their genetics, which I won't get into. But again, there's more to just taking things off the shelf. Omega-3 fatty acids are fabulous, and eating fish is one of the best ways to get them. Little fish, particularly like the sardines and the herrings and so on, if you like those sort of. And there's certainly supplements for people who are not able to eat fish for some reason. And there are also vegetarian and vegan sources nowadays as well. Clearly reducing, sorry, I'm the fun police, caffeine, alcohol, and refined sugars. Caffeine is a devil when it comes to increasing our stress response, spiking our blood glucose, and making everything worse, particularly our sleep. Alcohol, again, which is often what I see, women will have the caffeine to start the day and keep going, and then they need to calm down, and they do that with the alcohol. And because alcohol is coming to the body, but what it actually also does is it changes our sleep architecture. So it guarantees that we're not going to be able to sleep very well, and then we're going to wake up tired. So, they're short-term gaps, but long-term, they're going to create as much of the problem as they are initially when they were solving it. And stabilizing blood glucose is one of the simplest ways to start changing things. So making sure you've got protein the size and thickness of the palm of your hand, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It sounds so simple, but it's really absolutely important. And as I mentioned, the breathing in there, the mindfulness techniques, the progressive relaxation techniques, they are absolutely supportive. So you can start to think about how, as a naturopath and as a nutritionist and as a counselor, I start weaving all of these things together to get a supportive network around the people that come to see me. So validating the experience before we solve it is really important. I think that you name it, that you understand it's a transition, that it's not you essentially, but it's certainly your body. What I find is it's a really good way to go, well, this is my body just giving me information. It's actually saying to me, I need help, and this is what it looks like. So just making sure that you know what it is, that you know you're not alone. There's a great many women who are experiencing mood disorders of some kind and cognitive issues, and it's just your brain recalibrating and getting used to the new way your body will be for the rest of your life. And today I've given you a few things, some breathing techniques, some protein at each meal, making sure that perhaps you do those things before bed, the progressive relaxation, You could try some magnesium at night, but do check if you're on any medication, particularly heart medication or anything like that. You definitely need to do an interactions check. So it's neurobiological. It's, perimenopause is a really high risk factor. We've got some other conditions that perhaps could predispose us more likely to anxiety. We can do things like CBT. There's even hypnosis, which I didn't mention, has also got some really good evidence for decreasing hot flushes. And I'm going to suggest an integrative approach because that's what I do. But I also know that it is a really powerful thing and that it may be something that you are looking for or open to. What I also want to make sure that you do look for further support so that there are people like Lifeline and Beyond Blue that are there 24 hours a day. So 13, 11, 14 is the number for Lifeline. If at any point you feel desperate, please, that's the number to call. And it's also really important that you speak with your GP, and having a conversation with the GP, with me, I think it takes, as I said, an integrative approach to support a woman through this process. And it is there, it is available to you. Just need to reach out and make sure that you are taking advantage of everything that is available to you. So thanks for joining me. If you're sitting there wondering, going, oh, I don't know, maybe you want to book a discovery call with me. You're welcome to do that. We'll just have a 15-minute call. We'll just have a conversation to see what the next right thing is for you. And that may be seeing me and it may not be. And I'll be really honest with you about what I think I can do and where I think you might be best. And it may be with somebody else doing something else. That's fine. Next week, I'm going to talk about depression because I think that's also that low mood. The anxiety is almost like the heightened response, and the low mood is somewhat different. And I just want to make sure that we cover off on that as well. So that'll be next Wednesday. And if you wanted to have a look at my website, I also have a self-paced online Thrive Through Menopause program, which just goes through the real basics, building blocks of good support for menopause. And I've interviewed quite a few different experts on meditation, on breathing, on another naturopath. I've got a chef in there. I've got an exercise physio, and I've got a psychologist. So I've got a whole lot of other allied health professionals in there with me putting together this program, which I'm really proud about. And that might be the next right step for you. At any rate, if this is helpful, it would be great if you could also share this with somebody else that you think might benefit from it. So I'd love to see you subscribe as well, so we could make sure that you don't miss any episodes. Thank you for joining me.